Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I want to go over my feedback for riftraids. I was very fortunate enough to test riftraids with some other content creators and some mods. And so I feel like it's, my duty to share my experience with you guys and also kind of pick up on the things that I liked and perhaps, also think there's room for improvement. I know there's been a lot of controversy about Kabam lately with the power nerfs. I'll just give my brief feedback on that because I was obviously very vocal when they did the power increase initially. I feel like with the introduction of relics, it was going to take power to a level which really put the game on easy mode. So I understand why they've done it. It kind of begs the question as why did they even do the power increase in the first place? Which is, a very good question, to be honest, and one that I still don't really understand. But I understand the frustration. I can sympathize here with people that if you were, for example, doing expert dungeons and now you're gonna have to go back down. I can understand you not being able to complete stuff is gonna kind of make the gaming experience a little bit worse for you guys. So I do sympathize there. Anyway, we're going to talk about riftraids today and my experience of testing. So I banded together with, I'd say, there was 15 other people, the content creators, mods, and some Kabam staff who were testing. Basically, it was a play test, and we had slightly different circumstances for our play test because our energy regeneration was much faster than what's normal. In a normal rift raid, your energy is going to be replenishing every 8 hours, and we had a 2-hour playtest, so it was regenerating every 8 or 10 minutes, I think. So we had a slightly different experience there with it. I had a lot of fun. I'll say this: I did enjoy the game mode, and I'll give a brief format of the layout now. So when you enter the rift raid, you collect supplies immediately. So you're going to collect your energy, and you're going to collect your potions. And then you're just going to see the map, really. And what's in the map is you're going to have 5 sentinels and a gatekeeper. You can't get to the gatekeeper until you've defeated all 5 sentinels. And each sentinel is going to be connected to a number of minion towers. Now, the sentinels included Snow White, Oogie, Maleficent, Gaston, and Scrooge. There were varying difficulties of each sentinel based on the number of minions that were attached to the sentinel. So, for example, I think Oogie and Snow White both had 3 minions attached to them. And then Scrooge had 6, so he was definitely the most difficult sentinel to take on. And there were themes attached to these sentinels. So Snow White was royalty, Oogie was goofball, Maleficent I think was scary or villain, Gaston was leader, and then Scrooge was high tech. Now when we started the raid, we actually started on Rift Tier 5. We didn't start on Rift Tier 1 just because our playtest was a shorter experience and they wanted us to kind of make the most of it. So they bumped us up a few levels. And fighting each of these sentinels, there weren't really that many restrictions to begin with. There were some bonuses. So, for example, Snow White being royalty, if you took in a royalty melee, you would get a 50% attack bonus. So I would use Ariel on that sentinel. But there were no restrictions on these lower down tiers. And it was when we got to sort of like tier 11 to sort of 13, we started to see, bigger restrictions, and we had to use certain characters that fit the bill essentially. So it really opened itself up to players kind of utilizing their roster to the best of their ability. I'll give you an example. The villain node, which had Maleficent, required some scary characters and basically had restrictions that I couldn't really meet. I have an Oogie. I don't have Jack Skellington. I don't have a couple of other characters. And unfortunately, it meant that I couldn't really hit that node, so I couldn't make the most of attacking it. But that's where the team play comes into it. So if you've got, I think Oogie was really good for that node. So if you had a good Oogie Boogie and some other supporting characters, you could take your Oogie Boogie in and do decent damage and clear that Sentinel. I, on the other hand, have a decent royalty, decent leaders, and high tech. So I focused on Gaston, Scrooge, and Snow White. So it definitely meant that team play and making the most out of your club's roster came into play here, because energy is fairly sparse, so you want to be making sure that the right people are attacking the right Sentinels. The other thing is there was loads of challenge in riftraids. Now what I mean by that is that even on the lower tiers, you could really challenge yourself by clearing a Sentinel without clearing minions. So when minions are attached to the tower and you've not cleared them, they really boost the Sentinel that they're attached to. So, for example, Scrooge has 6 minions. So we managed to get to tier 13. And the Scrooge Sentinel itself on tier 13 had something ridiculous like a 38k power recommendation to to punch up. So for players that have super high astrals, super really high leveled characters, they might want to take on the Sentinel without clearing the minions to give themselves challenge. Now I did this a couple of times because I'd lost challenge in the game and I really wanted to test what I was capable of in these raids. And I can safely say that at tier 13, I'm pretty sure I had to clear at least 1 minion on the Scrooge Sentinel before I could even take on Scrooge, because it really was such a punch up in power. So Kabam really fine-tuned the power well in this raid. The Gatekeeper, so after you've cleared the Sentinels, you would take on the Gatekeeper. And the Gatekeeper itself, I mean, we are on lower rift tiers here, so I didn't really find it difficult. It was basically get your 10% damage and, and be done with it. I'm pretty sure most of us got the 10% and didn't have any issues getting defeated by the Gatekeeper. And I think that's probably because we just didn't get as far as we could in a 3-day period. Now, one thing I should mention is that the Sentinel traits might change. So I have a list of Guardians that I use, and I'm going to share those with you today. But in the future, they might use different traits for the 5 Sentinels that are attached in this raid. So these Sentinels might change, basically. But I wanted to share with you characters that I used all the time. I don't think you'll use your entire roster, but you'll use a decent chunk of it. You'll obviously use the characters that you've leveled most. But in my instance, I'll name a few. I used Ariel, Simba, Wally, Violet, Zerg, Scrooge, Tiana, Mr. Incredible. I used Mickey a lot. And then there's 2 that I didn't use that much, but I can understand why people would use them. Hero and definitely Oogie. If you have a really good Oogie, you'll do really well, because I think you've got Goofball and you've got that scary tower that, the Maleficent tower that he does really well with. Unfortunately, I just don't have a high level Oogie, so I didn't get to use him that much. There's definitely a whole host of characters you can use, and that you're obviously not limited to here. For example, Anna, she is really good for these raids. I just didn't use her because I have Ariel, who is, my highest level royalty. So I felt like I used her over Anna. There's something for everyone in these rift raids. I really want to emphasize that. There's huge power differences to some of the players in my club, for example, and there was a bit of a nervousness really around, certain players not being able to kind of compete at the high rift tiers. It doesn't really matter because, number one, you can always take out the minions, and the minions are going to be the lowest level battle in a rift tier. Or number two, if you can't actually even hit that rift tier, you can spend time on the lower tiers, earning points there instead. So they've fine-tuned the power difficulty to everyone, which I think is great. Really, really, really good. And as I said, I was able to, really challenge myself in this playtest. And, I on the Scrooge node, for example, I would always lose at least one character, and it was very much a slog to get through it. So really, really good stuff there. Energy. With a very different playtest to what I'm going to expect from the actual raid. We were able to use orbs when we did the playtest, and these were the orbs that were already existing in our accounts, but then we would basically get them back. So I had about 2,000 orbs, and even with the 8-minute timer, just because I wanted to test so much, I got through about 1,000 orbs. Now you're capped on what you can use, so you're only allowed to use, I think, 5 refreshes a day. But we were talking about 90 orbs to 90 to 100 orbs a refresh, which is going to be like 500 orbs a day. Now, I spent orbs refreshing purely because I wanted to play as much as I could. I'm not willing to spend that level of orbs to play a game mode every day. And this is my big issue with this raid, is that it's monetized. And I don't believe in monetizing content. I don't believe in the actual content itself being monetized. I feel like that's the wrong move. And I left feedback that either Kabam should reduce the kind of the cost of orbs, or introduce orbs, collection, maybe when you go at rift tiers. Because when you progress a rift tier, you don't get anything. You're just stuck with the energy. You're waiting for your refresh. And I'll be honest, the amount of energy you get isn't a lot. It's probably 2 or 3 battles max. So they're pushing you to spend orbs on refreshes to kind of make the most from the experience. Now, they will argue and say that they're not pushing for you to spend orbs, and that it's more of a calculated decision of how and when you spend orbs, because there is obviously going to be strategy to your spending, which I don't like the sound of. Like the whole idea of needing to be smart with when you spend money to play a game mode, because if you're a really top player and we're on Rift Tier 1, you don't want to be refreshing to fight the battles on Rift Tier 1. You want to be waiting for your other kind of, I guess, weaker club mates to clear those tiers, so that then you are being able to clear kind of the harder content. So there is strategy to how you spend the orbs, but I just don't like the fact that you have to spend orbs in the first place. Like, just cap what you can use per day. Don't give people a way to finance it in bankroll it. And as a leader of a club, it's kind of made me a little bit awkward about how I go about that with my club mates, because you have to kind of find common ground on who's going to be spending and who isn't, and how you're going to utilize the refreshes. So I got a little bit bummed out by that. As much as I really enjoyed the playtesting, I got a little bit kind of... it made me think of when we actually do when it goes live. And the feedback I left really was that, reduce the cost and give you energy when you progress a rift tier. Because, as I say, it's 3 battles. I know it's every 8 hours. So maybe when it gets to it, it'll actually be refreshing more often than not. But if you're quite a competitive player, you're just going to be sitting around twiddling your thumbs waiting for that 8-hour refresh, or you're just going to have to spend orbs. So that was my only downside really with the playtest. As I said, didn't really feel it, because whatever I spent in the playtest kind of got refunded to me, because it was just a playtest. But I got through 1,000 orbs, and it still made me feel a little bit... still made me feel a little bit meh about about that element of it. Anyway, let's get to my overall conclusion. I think this game mode is what we need in the game, okay? We need something that's going to be able to challenge ourselves, that it might get repetitive at some point, but if they change the Sentinel Guardians, every couple of weeks, then you won't get that repetition as much, and diversity in a game mode itself, it is great. The challenge is there. That's huge. The challenge is there. The game got very easy. They've given you reason to farm characters again. They've given you reason to, like, for example, I am going to go away and I've been farming my Oogie Boogie because I know that he was needed on towers which I couldn't commit to. So it's given purpose to farming again. I was able to use a decent chunk on my roster, which was nice. The restrictions, as I say, as you go up the rift tiers, they get tighter. And I think that's good as well. Like, it needs to get harder as you progress up the tiers, which is, of course, not just by, recommended power, but also by, the guardians you need to use. So that was good. It's going to require you to work as a club, which is also a great thing, because currently right now, we've just got Stellar and dungeons, and that's not really... It's just who spends the most money on energy at the end of the day for Stellar, and who spends the most on bundles for dungeons, so they can use potions and all that. So it's really not. It's not a cooperative game mode, okay? So there's nothing really for clubs right now. So it's great that we've got something for clubs finally. The monetization, I'm always going to have an issue with that. As I said, I never believe in monetizing the game mode directly. Like, my example of this is make the game mode require you to farm certain characters, then you'll spend on those characters, okay? Like Oogie Boogie, for example, I know he's good, so I'm going to go away and spend money on leveling him up, to a certain level, or focusing on him. I don't want to have to spend money on the actual game mode itself. Because that's very pay to win, and as much as I have spent a lot of money on this game, that's not what I'm about at all. So yeah, overall, pretty good reception. I left my feedback. Let's see what they do with it. The raids are going to be launching, tomorrow, I think. So yeah, lots to look forward to. We'll see how it goes. We'll see what the community has to say. We'll see if they took any of our feedback and, changed anything because of it. So yeah, really thank you again to Kabam for letting me play test, and let me know what you think down below. What are your concerns? What are you excited for with Rift Raids? I hope you've enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in the next one.